acceptable as it throws the prism of nationalism. We have Mopla uprising during the Quit India movement, but how we can deny completely the importance of the subaltern society?
No, no. Actually, Mapla uprising main writings are in the nationalist tradition. Mapilas may be regarded as subalterns, but their uprising had a religious character also. They attacked only the Hindu landowners. They converted them, and even the Samurin was forced to be converted to Islam. Uh, so there was this character also, which is always there in subalterns. Subaltern movements, because they don't have modern ideologies, the tribes, and it's there in the subaltern cities themselves. They first attack another tribe rather than the British. They attack the money lender rather than the British. So this is the problem there. Mapla uprising um, was actually sympathetically treated by many Kerala writers who were Hindus, because they did not want that communalism should develop. So the real history of Mapla uprising was actually prevented from coming out. Some of their atrocities against Hindu landlords, higher landlords, was never brought out. That often happens when you have an uprising. It does not have a uh, modern principle of equity. You can't say it was a landlord, anti-landlord uprising. Why did they not attack Muslim landlords? They were also oppressing them. So there was this communal element. This did not justify the way Maplas were treated by the British government in Malabar. But um, uh, in national history, Mapla rebellion is already always treated, favorably treated. The atrocities are not given. Only the fact that they were so badly treated, killed, that is brought up. So I think Mapla is one case where actually the subaltern theory doesn't work. And as I said yesterday, Gandhi didn't call off the civil Khilafat non-cooperation movement in the Mapla uprising, although that was far more serious than Chauri Chaura.
How come that this important project was Punjab and Bengal? Because in the last moment, these two provinces were not under Muslim League domination, but just the coming of 1940, these two provinces simply gave way to Muslim League. Like in the Unionist Party, when Sardar Sikandar Ayub died in, I think, 1941, and in Satya, how these two people allowed Jinnah to have a story? Can you throw some light on this?
Well, they were different. I think they have to be treated differently. In Bengal, the major distinction was between Muslim peasantry and Hindu landowners. There were Muslim landowners, but Hindu landowners, even in Mughal Empire, they were basically the landowners in Bengal, and the peasants were Muslims. And this actually was the base for Fazlul Haq's group in the Muslim League. He was a peasant leader. And that is why he could often ally with the Congress, particularly the Bose brothers. Um, and he could easily ally with the Hindu Mahasabha also on a compromise that I will only have rent reduction. But this was the strength of the Muslim League. It had real peasant support. And the Congress was seen as the landlord's party. In Punjab, you know, this presence of three religions who had from around 1870s quarreled among themselves in Urdu language. All their debates were in Urdu. As Nehru once said that the debate on whether it should be Punjabi Gurmukhi script or Hindi Nagari script is conducted in Urdu in eastern Punjab. So this was the basis for the breakup of the Unionist Party. In the 37 elections, they had done well. They had combined the rich peasants, Jat rich peasants under what was his name, Sir Chotu Ram. Sir Chotu Ram, Sikhs under Tara Singh and Sikandar Hayat in the Unionist Party. But this tended to break down on various issues, uh, money lenders, whether money lenders should be allowed to buy lands or not, and that kind of thing. And Muslim League took advantage of it. And this, because they had not only weakened Muslim League, the Unionist Party, they had, remember, weakened also the Congress. The Congress, who used to get elected from Haryana, couldn't. So both these parties were weakened. And what happened in the 1946 elections was that um, both the parties, Congress and Muslim League, both waned. Congress in Haryana parts and Muslim League in West Bengal. And that is why the Unionists were under.
Sir, till 1942, we see the Gandhiji's his ideas about non-violence, about Satyagraha. But when sir 1942, he gave the call, do or die. Why he sir changed the entire approach? As do or die, it means that the non-violence will be offered. So why he was why he changed the entire approach on that sir?
No, by Karo, he said in Hindi, Karo ya Maro.
Yes, sir, that
So Karo does not mean that you kill anyone. When you go out in protest and so on, it doesn't mean that. If you, Karo doesn't mean Maro. He never thought of violence, and he condemned it throughout. In fact, he went on fast when the Viceroy approved, said that he was condoning violence. He went on fast. He said, I never condone violence under whatever circumstances.
So in the context of secularism in Indian history, is it ever possible to see India as a proper secular country?
Well, actually, this can't be said about any country in the world. If you go to the past, there is almost no nation anywhere. What about Greeks? All their philosophers and so on lived in either Turkey, which was, Turkey was a Greek country until the Seljuks conquered it and practically Islamized it. And Egypt and so on. So you can't say that just because Greek philosophy flourished and Greek literature outside modern Greece, Greece is not a country. Well, India has become a country through political circumstances, geography, perhaps caste system. Very cultural. Brahmins are found everywhere as foreigners, you noted. So all these things make up a country. These are various factors. India has a large number of such factors which unify it. And actually other factors which also divide it as in other countries. So India is not an exceptional case. We have a good foundation for being a nation. We behave well. Thank you.